All right, and they can hear me. Okay. We're going to start in a few minutes. We're going to wait for people to get their breakfast tacos and their locations as well as here. So it's going to be a little awkward for the people at City Hall because I'm talking to you all, but also to everyone else in our different facilities. So we'll be starting up in like 2 minutes. Give a chance for people to come in.
Good. I'm glad. Who bullied you? Why didn't you bully her?
Kevin.
Now get Carrie up here.
I think Isaac sent the questions.
I mean, I did just send him to David. We told him. Hello.
And sometimes it's a budget balancing tool as well. The other thing is when we do our compensation, so the compensation like in our merit compensation goes into effect in January. So it's not fully funded in that first year. And so a lot of this year's pressure points and for us kind of focusing on how we put the budget is recognizing the full year impact of that hyper growth. And so we already started with having to fund the full year this next year, which added expense pressures on us. We also have been significantly preparing for the infrastructure that's coming online in our water treatment facilities. So we have a wastewater treatment expansion as well as a significant water treatment expansion. So the largest project in the history of the city is our South Lake treatment plant, and we've got a lot of pressure points there. We've been talking with the council over a number of months. So here's just a breakdown of the different presentations we've had with them to kind of help build the blocks of the budget and where we're here today. And the last time we met with council was on July 11th. We presented kind of a rough sketch of what the budget was going to look like. Next slide. Oh, I caught up again. All right. So the themes for this year's budget are to maintain service levels, and they have been over the last several years. And so as we're growing fast and dealing with inflation and rapid growth in a tight labor market, it really is all about trying to maintain service levels. We do have some areas in which we're going to be doing some expansion as well. So it's, again, addressing the full year impact of new positions. So we had almost 80 in the budget last year, and then we added another 7 mid-year, which has been common for us in order to be able to respond to the kind of changes that we're seeing throughout the year. And then just to maintain core services. So that's in public safety, water, as I mentioned already. And then the one new initiative that we're working on, it's been a multi-year initiative, is customer service and to create a 311-like system for our community. So they are able to call one number. People are able to call one number to be instead of memorizing 20-something numbers, which CAPE Communications done a great job of trying to help outline for the public what that looks like. We want to have one phone number for people to call. That doesn't mean that one call center will handle every service issue in the city. It means it will be a networked approach to where they will receive it at a centralized place, and then the departments will continue to respond to service needs as you do today. We also recognize we have a significant number of studies that are underway, and a lot of times people ask me, well, how are we managing this growth? How do we have a game plan? This is how you have a game plan. This is how you understand how we're managing the growth and also knowing the direction that we're going. So between the Unified Development Code update, which hadn't been updated in 20 years, that is our basically all of our development, zoning, those kinds of codes, to our transportation planning moving forward. We've got a couple different corridor studies that we're working on, the downtown master plan, obviously rate studies we're working on within our utilities, and we've completed a lot too. So we are working to, and so as we looked at this year's budget, we're really focusing on a couple of key areas that are feeling the most pressure as a result of rapid growth. So that is in the dispatch area. We've got a few positions in electric, several positions in water and support staff. Again, launching the 311. We are continuing to seeing increases in call volume in fire, and be able to, we're proposing to hire additional positions there because of daily staffing levels and controlling overtime and holdback. And then we also are planning for, so a big part of this budget is the most significant portion of the budget is capital improvements. And so we have a strong capital improvement program, but we're also focusing on future capital improvement approvals as well. So we are anticipating a November bond election. Within that November bond election, and we're going to talk about it more with council on Tuesday, but right next Tuesday, what we anticipate being the elements of the bond would be a new city administration building. So it'd be by the GMC likely. to house a lot of our development service areas and other departments like HR. More to come on that front. Those departments have already been, we've been communicating, coordinating, collaborating with the departments that will be affected. But we're running out with all the additional positions that we have. We do not want to be in lease space long term. That's the most expensive way to provide space. And so it's to help save on costs, also to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the space in which people are housed in. And so we're working on a significant administration building. It doesn't replace City Hall. It's just an additional building that we have and create more of a campus feel, we hope, over at the GMC area. And then the other areas for the November bond election are we're working on animal shelter. So it'd be joining the regional animal shelter is our current plan, but to deal with the expansion and the needs of that facility. But we also will have the option to expand the animal shelter or rebuild the animal shelter in its current location. So we'll see how that plays itself out, but that'll be on the November bond. And then expansion and remodel of the recreation center, we believe will be on the November bond, likely Blue Hole Park, to be able to redo Blue Hole Park. There's a lot of energy around just creating out more opportunities in our downtown, understanding how our downtown and the use of downtown continues to expand. And so that's a key investment. And then lastly would be likely a partnership with the YMCA to do a YMCA facility on the far west side of Georgetown, out by the Tom Thumb. It's the best way to say that, next to Wellsprings Methodist Church. In terms of council and how that aligns with council's goals, our budget, and what our work has been focused on, I wanted just to highlight how some of these things are connected. So they're not the studies, the work initiatives, the budget are all connected together and fall generally under the umbrella of what council's goals are. They've got several different pillars that they have been working on. The first is governance and making sure that they're equipping themselves and thinking about how in their role they're effective and supporting the council manager form of government. The second and probably the biggest thing we talk about obviously is growth. So proactive planning, financial stability within that, specifically water and working on water supplies and treatment facilities and accelerating and delivery of infrastructure and maintaining high service levels. And so you can see, obviously, the things I was just talking about, how they connect with the council's goals. Also have housing as a plank of their council goals, and just really grappling with the mix of housing and how that should look. And a lot of what we talk about is affordability and density related to housing and what that looks and feels like for Georgetown. What's the right mix and how do we help establish affordability? They also have a focus on making sure there's a certain level of executive housing within our community because that creates a good balance. Downtown's obviously a focus. It's a crown jewel of our community. Everyone talks about how it really separates us from a lot of other communities. And then the last one, economic development, just recognizing that we need to continue to make key investments for strong jobs and commercial opportunities to help our community for success moving forward. The total budget is $861 million. That is an increase from last year. The main increase by over 100 million. The main increase has been seen in the CIP area. So this is $327 million in CIP. You can see how that's spread out. Not surprisingly, the highest amount of capital improvement dollars is in water. And then the general capital projects, 85 million. The large majority of that is in our roadway increases. But interesting that our general fund decreases by 12%, mainly because we had significant studies and CIP projects within the general fund last year. There we go. All right, so the way that the budget's put together is we obviously have our base budgets, existing staffing, supplies, maintenance, and costs. We did ask for those base budgets to be reduced this year. In previous years, what we've done is, like last year, we just put an automatic inflationary increase in the budget. We weren't in the position to be able to do that this year. In fact, what we found ourselves in, like I mentioned before, is we had the full year impact of several different pieces that were driving costs up in the general fund and in other funds. And then we also have less revenue. So while our property tax revenue continues to be strong, our sales tax revenue has not performed very well this year, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is I think it's just we've seen hyperinflation, hyper growth the last few years at really not a sustainable level. We budgeted 8% increase in sales taxes last year, and that's because we've seen double-digit increases in the 2 to 3 years before that. But we actually are experiencing right now about a 1% growth in sales tax, not an 8% growth. And so we worked on cutting the budget, this existing budget this year. But we also are concerned about next year, just that it's not going to grow as fast as what we've seen in previous years. And so we're planning on budgeting 2% for this next year. And so those two, and sales taxes is our largest revenue source in the general fund. So that really drives some limitations that we have. The other thing you might have heard about this that's kind of dampening our sales tax is one of our retailers, the building supply retailers, Builders First Source, actually is not paying any sales tax in Georgetown right now. They haven't paid for this whole last year. And the reason for that is because they moved. You might have to go back one. Sorry, you're trying to anticipate me. I appreciate that. But they have not paid sales tax in the city of Georgetown for this last year. The reason for that is because they signed an economic development agreement or merged with the company that had signed an economic development agreement with the city of Helotes. Helotes signed an agreement saying that if you source all of your sales tax to us, we will rebate your sales tax back by 75%. We don't think that's legal because it's a brick and mortar store in Georgetown. And that in and of itself impacts our sales tax by about 5%. So we're challenging that through the comptroller. We hope that we see something different, but we're not going to know about that until well into 2024. And it's not, I don't think it's wise for us to assume that money is going to come in or that those sales tax dollars will be there. We've got a plan around what we know today. The other thing that we just for you to know about sales tax is it is volatile. That's why we have excess reserves to be able to handle that if we need to, if we can't handle it through our normal budget management processes. But and so for example, when we've seen shifts in new building, new housing, that does significantly impact our sales tax. We estimate that about 20% of our sales tax is related to building materials and new construction. And so we just know as that ebbs and flows, that's going to have changes within our sales tax. And then we did look at service level enhancements. We were more limited in what we could look at this year than previous years based on what I've just talked about. And obviously we have our significant capital improvements and debt service associated with those capital improvements. So I think next we're going to talk about property tax. And property tax, we've seen a significant increase, and that's because of just the value increases two reasons. One, a lot of new construction, new value on the ground. Seen over 1.5 billion, I think it's 1.6 billion of new infrastructure on the ground. Not infrastructure, excuse me, new improvements. And so you can see that on the slide. We hit 1.5 billion in 2023. That's the highest that we've ever had. You can see a significant increase there. And that also then results in just the overall increase in assessed valuations. We also, and those of you who live in Georgetown may have experienced this, you've seen a significant increase in market value for your homes. Assessed valuations, taxable valuations can't increase for your homesteads more than 10% a year. And so there's going to be some years where you see a 10% increase in your value of assessed valuation because it's catching up to those large market increases. And so we were seeing about a 17% increase in our property tax. We are proposing a rate that is the same as last year at 37.4 cents. You can see here it's very interesting that our property tax is split up into operation and maintenance and INS. So debt is the largest portion of our property tax. And then O&M is 13 cents. So it's a smaller portion of that 37 cents. We estimate that the average homestead tax bill will increase by $125 for the next year. We still have the homestead exemption on, and then you can see here how the taxable value has gone up from 1 year to the next. Next slide. Just waiting on the slide transition, folks. There we go. So sales tax. So this is what I was talking about. So we've seen we've seen a 7% below projections for this year. You can see here how we're estimating in the year and for next year at 2% growth. And I mentioned builders force source as well. You can hit the next slide. And then we still are going to maintain our economic stability reserve at 8%. Because we want to make sure that as we see additional volatility that we can tap into that through this next year. Some of the other revenues that you can see here, and you can hit next slide, but payment in lieu of taxes and franchise fees are a significant portion of that. At 12.6 million, you can see how the various utilities support the general fund, and then we have full year fee increases of cost recovery and benchmarking of other rates. So we're going to be looking at other rates, just making sure that we're benchmarking appropriately, and then we're forecasting just for a moderate revenue from planning and permitting fees. So next, what we'll do is we'll kind of highlight some of the key additional positions or other service level requests that we were able to fund. So we have planning department. We have an associate planner in that area. We have a funding of the library master plan that is actually the majority of the funding is coming from the Friends of the Library, but to look at the existing library and how it can be best be maximized. Then we have the 311 call center. I think what's important to note about this is that these positions are staggered through the end of the year, so that we'll look at our economic conditions, and if we see the need to cut further, we may hold and slow down on the implementation of that call center, and we'll see where that goes. A big portion of our increases for service levels, but increases in general are compensation. So we have here a compensation plan for police and fire at 1.8 million. I think it's actually inched up to 1.9 million now, based on just market review. Overstaffing funding. We have a life safety specialist position in fire, and promotion of the deputy fire marshal. And then we have 4 emergency communicators, police record specialist, and then just a higher cost on body cameras for police. We also have 5 fire positions. That's the overstaffing funding, fire positions that are being added for this next year, as I mentioned before. So in communications, we have the launch, some marketing that we want to do because it's a big public outreach, and we want to make sure that the public's utilizing it well. So it's 311 system launch and marketing. We also have marketing for the bond election that we anticipate will occur in November. We've got the animal shelter transition costs. In Parks and Recreation, we have a parks maintenance worker. This is a position that's going to really be focused on downtown and downtown maintenance of our public areas. We've got bay heaters in the Parks Department that haven't been replaced, I don't think, for generations, maybe. We have additional costs in pool chemicals, maintenance, and recreation supplies. Okay, great. All right. So we also now have just the cost associated with the lease. So we spend over $800,000 a year on the lease of that building off Interloop, and the general fund cost of that portion of that is almost $300,000, and that's we hope is temporary based on just what we're seeing in terms of our overall need. And that's the whole focus of one of the whole focuses of the city admin building. We also in the water fund, just to highlight some things there, we have continued growth. And so we see projected sales of water and wastewater at $85 million. We assume 250 connections a month, so about 2,000 connections per year, which is slower than what we've seen in previous years. We are going to need to, based on all the costs that we're seeing in our water utility and all the investments that are being made, we're going to need to make a rate increase of 13% across all customer classes for this next year. It's about $6 a month for the average residential customer. Impact fees continue to be a large portion of what funds the water, and so it's close to $30 million. In terms of positions and other initiatives in the water fund, we have metering services and metering techs. You can see several positions in water service administration. We have water plant management, so to improve and anticipation of our South Lake Treatment Plant coming online, additional plant technicians and operators, several positions in wastewater plant management as well. We have a plan to be able to monitor those 24 hours a day, which they're not today, and then several positions in water operations and a position in regulatory to make sure that we're in compliance. And then some other highlights here, you can see some investments in other areas of maintenance, like in the EARS program, which is looking at all of our wastewater lines and making sure we're keeping those maintained well, to increases in irrigation operations. And then we have obviously several things that we're doing on the water conservation front to enhance the ability to do rebates and enhance education outreach. On the electric fund, we have electric sales at about $100 million. We see residential growth as well as significant industrial growth. And so CellLink coming online and GF manufacturing, they're coming online as well. Those are both large power customers. Purchase power costs are estimated to be up to $70 million for this next year. The staffing increases here really focus on operational technology and being able to manage our technical side of our water and wastewater system, our SCADA system, and then the physical security of our water system as well. And we do, this is one of the few departments that doesn't have an assistant director, and so we're working on hiring an assistant director position. We also are going to be increasing tree trimming. So if you live in Serenata, I want to apologize right now. We're going to be doing more tree trimming, but that'll help in terms of outages in the future. All right, and airport, and we're going to highlight just a few other funds, and then we're going to wrap it up and we'll start getting to questions. So on the airport, total revenues are almost $6 million with expenses at 5.7. So we've seen expenses over the previous years. A decrease over the previous years. And I'm going to move on to stormwater. Actually, let me just keep moving on, and I'll answer questions if y'all have specific questions about these funds. In stormwater, we're going to add a couple positions, light equipment operators, and also increase mowing contracts, as well as increase of open drainage maintenance. And that'll be important. We have a master plan happening in stormwater, so we'll have more updates on this fund as we look at 2025. So in terms of Convention and Visitor Bureau, the revenue continues to recover after the pandemic. So we've seen an increase in overall hotel occupancy tax. And we are going to this next year is the 25-year anniversary of Red Poppy, so we're going to have additional dollars for an expanded festival, as well as those holiday decorations that you see. I think they might be some of the original. And so if you look closely, well, don't look closely, but we're going to get some new ones for this next year. And then facilities maintenance, we've got some minor replacements there, enhancements, and fleet is the same way. And IT, Some of the big expenses are going to be related to fiber, as well as cybersecurity and network and access control. In joint services, so we're fully funding the cost allocation study. In joint services, we had an outside firm look at how we're dividing up shared services for our entire organization, and that made some major shifts, had major financial impacts, mainly for the general fund. We also have an accounting position, a couple positions in customer billing, a permit tech position in system engineering, and one position in human resources. So overall, in terms of the number of positions, while we've seen it's a tighter budget year than we've seen in previous years, but that doesn't mean that we're not able to push resources to where the biggest pressure points are. And so we're able to add, we're proposing to add 51 positions for this next year. You can see how those are divided up between the different funds. The largest is the general fund. Big portion of that is the staffing in 311 and 9 positions for a call center. And I've talked about that already. I think it's important as we kind of transition to the end of this presentation that we talk with council, and council recognizes this for sure, and you've seen this with their commitment to expanded compensation and different benefit programs. But we're a service organization, and our people are our most important asset for sure. We've been tracking closely turnover rates. We've been experiencing higher turnover in the last year, like probably the rest of the world. And our goal is to stay below 15% turnover, which we are tracking at 9% this year, which is good. And we want to make sure that I would love to stay below 10% because I think that's important for be able to retain employees so we can continue our mission that we're all are focused on. But the challenges in our, in compensation and in our staffing continue. We do have a tight labor market. There are a number of vacant positions. Looked at a last count, and it's been a couple weeks ago, but we have over 90 positions vacant. And we were working on making sure that we're a good employee of choice. So we've done that in a variety of different ways. And so here are some things and just changes over the last year that we've implemented. I would say this is not a all-inclusive list. There's significant things we've done, a number of different fronts. But I do want to talk about compensation. So we are proposing a 4% merit increase for this next year. That's an average. So you can get between 3 and 5% based on your performance evaluation that would be implemented in January like we have in previous years. We also are doing market for the entire organization, not just for police and fire, but for the entire organization. And so those range between 3 and 4% increases depending upon where your position is in the market. We typically see about half of the employees that get a market increase just based on comparing like jobs with other like organizations. On civil service, we anticipate based on the market review our police going up an average of 7% in their market. Obviously steps are getting funded as well for police and fire, and for the fire department for those to go up by 5%. And then self-insurance fund, I think it's always important to talk about. When we talk about compensation, it's also important to talk about insurance at the same time, right? And so the short summary of this is that our self-insurance fund is in good condition. We're going to fund the employee side is going to fund 5% into increase into contributions into the self-insurance fund, but we're not going to require anything from employees. So what that means is no premium changes. So we will keep premiums at the current level that they are. And so that won't be a kind of a downward impact on compensation that you get for this next year. So here's where we are in the budget process. So we've officially proposed the budget per compliance with the charter for next year. And we've set for in the August 8th meeting, the council will set the maximum tax rate and then set the public hearings. We'll have those public hearings in August and September with the adoption of the budget plan for September 12th and in time for the new fiscal year starting on October 1. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get to the questions to make sure that we answer. And we've already had several people that have already submitted really good questions. So I'm going to push on those, and we'll get through those, and I'll make sure that if there are any other questions, and those of you who are here in person have a question, feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to answer that question as well. All right, so will service level requests that did not get initially approved be considered if revenues come in better than expected? Yes, they always are. If you look at the last couple of years, we've had mid-year amendments based on just the dynamic nature of our community. And so this last year we made some changes on pay, as an example, for dispatchers, because of just what we were seeing in terms of vacancy rates and things of that nature, and making sure that we are working on retention and attracting those vacant positions. We've added mid-year, we've added positions in planning and inspection before, and engineering, based on growth pressures that we've seen. So yes, there are opportunities to consider additional requests or to amend the budget through the budget year. What does the city have in place for dealing with infrastructure needs as the city grows? And then it was roads, electric needs, water, city services. So that's a kind of a broad question, but I'll answer it in several different ways. One is we have a very strong CIP plan. We have a 5-year plan for capital improvements, and we have a longer master plan related to water infrastructure, to road infrastructure. So yes, there is absolutely a plan. There's a maintenance plan as well. So we're finishing a pavement condition index study right now, which will be updated our old one. It rates how do we decide where we do maintenance on our roads? Where does that quarter-cent sales tax that we have that goes towards street maintenance? How do we apply that? Well, we do it based on a plan, based on identified needs and community input. And so those are, Parks Master Plan. How do we decide what do we do? What do we need to do next in parks? We have a master plan associated with that. So that is one main way in which we make sure that we're guiding the way in which we're growing and we're dealing with the biggest pressure points. I would also say, from an operations standpoint, it's really critical for departments to have what I say, know your numbers, know the things that drive your work plan and drive your pressure points. So when we've made decisions in the past about adding a position in parks maintenance, as an example, or adding a position at the fleet department, or in facilities, it's all based on metrics that we're looking at about how many facilities are we adding, how many vehicles are we adding, and how we balancing workload based on those increases that we're seeing. And so those are all ways in which we're trying to guide and plan for growth and really identify where the biggest pressure points are. There's not enough resources to be able to hit everything all at once. There never are. I don't know if that's the way in your personal family budget. It is in our personal family budget. So it's really identifying, what are the biggest guiding points by the council, and obviously as related to the community, and then what are the biggest pressure points just to maintain service levels. Oh, okay, we'll do that. Ryan.
Yeah. So I'm curious, have y'all looked at the projections of what do y'all think the revenue change will be from a lot of these industrial projects we approved, especially GAF and oh gosh, what's the other one? The solar panel people.
Link, yeah.
Link, yeah. What are you thinking in terms of our revenue? How significant of an impact will those be once they come online?
I think they will be, in and of themselves, they're not large sales tax generators because of the nature of their manufacturing. They don't have an end product they sell to. It's not like the same as Costco, for example, which is a huge sales tax generator, but they're a large property tax generator as well as employer, which has a ripple effect. Does it make sense? Because it's allowing better quality jobs for people in this region. Hopefully some of those are in Georgetown. Hopefully they go across the street and shop at Costco, because Link's right across from Costco. They sell and that, so there's a ripple effect associated with that. I think that it's definitely better impact than we see from additional residential coming online. I don't have off the top of my head exactly what those dollars amount, but when we do look at economic development, we do have we look at what we anticipate their revenue will be, and they're a better net impact than we see in other general development, like homes, apartments, things of that nature, because their cost of service is lower. What I mean by that is the cost for us to serve the service demands that they have are lower than you see in like a residential multifamily project. But we have some pro forma that we think will happen with Solink and GAF, but or GAF. I just don't have that off the top of my head. But that's how we look at any economic development project. We look at the net impact over 10 years. And typically these are positive net impacts, even with our incentives and over a 3 to 5 year time frame. Okay, another question coming in is, okay, sorry about that. I'm getting down to the question here. Ooh, I may need a lifeline on this one. Do we have a plan or vision in place to solve the broad data architecture governance problems that currently exist? There's a vast amount of value locked up in our disparate systems that we could be realizing to offset and even overtake cost. So I'd love for the person who submitted that to give me more information about what specifically you're talking about. What I think you're talking about is some of our large infrastructure or large software applications that are in place, and how are we maximizing the usage of that. I think it's really important. If you look at our IT costs have gone up significantly, and some of those systems are not as well utilized and taken advantage of as they originally thought of. And so I think making sure that we leverage those as well as possible is really important. So I would love for you to follow up with me a little bit more so I can understand that better. But I can say, yes, there is plans for sure to maximize some of those things. Like, for example, we're working on N4 as an example. N4 is an asset management system, and it was intended to be used broadly. It's not being used broadly right now. It's being used only by a few departments, and we're not taking full advantage. That doesn't mean that we should force other departments to use N4. Maybe we need to find a tool that's broader utilized and better utilized across organizations so we can maximize it. It's based on its cost, maximize its use. All right, next question. What was the hardest part about balancing the budget this year? I think the hardest part was recognizing. Well, one is we've got a lot of really good requests. We've got a lot of things that are kind of midstream in terms of initiatives that we are not able to move forward on because we just don't have enough revenue. And so I think the hardest part was just really focusing on what are the biggest pressure points, what are the have-to-haves, and then also balancing that with what the council feels like are some of the have-to-haves. And so that left a lot of really good requests and good initiatives that we're just not going to be able to move forward on for this next year. But I think that's an important way to look at it, because it's not fair to ask departments to do all these major things that we're wanting to do, but not have the resources to do that. So I think we're going to have to really narrow our focus over this next year to make sure that we're being disciplined about what we're taking on, and recognizing there's going to be some limitations to that, because we've got to manage burnout and manage workload. Did council make any changes to the proposed budget? The two things they focused on, we gave the preliminary presentation on July 11th. The two things they wanted us to look at was one, there is the police department proposed a mental health unit, which would be 4 positions, I believe, and then all the equipment that would go along with that. And I think that's a really important request. And would help our community, as well as specifically help with pressure points in the police department. But we were not able to fund that because of the large size of that request. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but I think it was close to $1 million. So, but council wanted to try and find a way to at least start building towards funding that for this next year, or maybe even for 2025, and start making the first commitments to this. And we kind of did something similar with K9, where we built up and we spread it out over 2 years. So we hired the staffing in the second year and a lot of the equipment in the first year. So we're working on with Chief Cheetah, we're working on a plan where we would we've got overstaffing authority in the police department. So working on potentially towards the end of 2024 fiscal year or mid-year through 2024 fiscal year, we could add those a couple of those positions on to start that mental health unit and then build on that for 2025. The other piece of feedback they gave on the budget was that we initially proposed a sales tax for next year of 4%, and that's really based on kind of flat sales tax for this next year, except for the impact of Costco and the expanded HEB and discounting that. So we felt like that was pretty reasonable. Council wanted to pull that down further just based on the volatility that we've been seeing this year, which is why you're seeing us propose it at 2%. So those are the two pieces of feedback I recall, main pieces of feedback I recall from the budget, from the council. Other than a lot of compliments about how the budget put together and well thought out and support of staff. I mean, that was a big piece of feedback from them. Is it possible for, here's a lot of comp questions. So is it possible for, is it possible for employees that have multiple licenses as a requirement for the city to get bigger percent raises? No, it's not, but it is, but we do have been in a lot of our positions. And if the person asking this question is not set up for your job, we've been giving additional raises as you have gotten or achieved certifications. So if you achieve certain certifications, there's eligibility for pay increases. And so we kind of layer those into the job planning. So if that's not happening in your area, I'd be happy to receive that specific feedback from you, and we can look at that with your department. Can city employees receive time on duty to work out, as do other police and fire, as a perk? We can look at that. I don't think that's in our plan for today. There are certain fiscal requirements for the police department, fire department, which are why we have the ability for that to occur, just to be fit for duty. Those aren't the same requirements in other areas. And so that's the rationale about why we looked at that and have been doing that for a few years with those departments. But we have not looked at that for across the board. How does market increase work if there are no similar title or duties in your position? Typically there are. There are a few positions that are hard to compare to. And when that's the case, what we do is we try and compare them with similar types of positions, whether it be in the city. So we look at internal equity or parity associated with that. But we go beyond just what our traditional city comparisons are in order to be able to find comps. So we do that with our electric utility. We do that with some of the other positions that are difficult to find comparisons with. And so if there's a market, and we're actually reviewing that right now. So if there's a position that's really hard to compare with, feel free to bring that up with HR, and we can show you how we're doing that. Is there plans for Public Works to get a new building and a bigger yard space for equipment? The plan would be for, actually the plan is for to have the current GMC parts of that, the people that are there right now move into the new building. And so that'd be permitting that would move, customer care that would move. Right now, as I recall, it's the main groups that would still be there would be portions of the warehouse, fleet, Public Works, and electric. And then there are also plans long-term for potentially electric to have a facility. So I think the goal for Public Works would be to be able to remodel the GMC, and we have that kind of in a long-term plan to remodel the GMC for Public Works. What is the plan if sales tax continues to slow down? Will we have to make more budget reductions? Well, I mean, It depends on if they're sustained. So one of the framework around budgeting is you don't want to, if you look at it being a short-term, if it's a short-term issue or a short-term reduction in revenue, you can look at short-term ways in which to solve that. If you're concerned about them being long-term issues and long-term reductions, then you need to look at long-term ways in which to make those reductions. So the short-term way is for us to tap into some of our reserves to brace for those temporary lowering of revenue. If it's long-term, then we've got to look at longer-term to reoccurring costs to make reductions. So that's the way I would answer that. We've talked with council. It's important to be able to utilize the economic stability reserve. It's there for a reason. We don't need it to be there to be a sustaining, having to maintain sustaining long-term cuts or long-term reductions of revenue, I should say. So the answer is that's how we'll deal with the sales tax reduction. Is we'll deal with it by bracing for it short-term, maybe through the reserves, but long-term we may have to look at cuts. We'll see. We track that closely, obviously. I'm optimistic. I'm not pessimistic about sales tax. I think we've had a huge increase. If you look at those huge increases, that was not sustainable to have it sales tax increases at that level. But moderate growth in sales tax is a good, healthy sign for us. Sorry. How will the city adjust as it continues to grow? How many departments? Many departments are stretched thin, and Georgetown is only going to grow. Well, I can tell you. So how will we manage this and adjust as we continue to grow? It's to have good planning and also to be flexible. I think the challenge that we've seen in the last couple of years is that our growth has accelerated a lot faster than what we anticipated. And let me talk about that real quick, because there is, if you go on Facebook, you would say there's a simple answer to all this. You just don't approve building permits. And then people will stop coming here and everything will be solved. We legally can't do that. All right. So we cannot just stop building permits. Now, council cannot approve zoning requests. We can look at long-term planning related to infrastructure and kind of manage growth that way. But there's some limitations on how we can just stop growth. We can't just stop growth. They point to Leander. Leander passed a resolution saying we're going to encourage limiting growth. That did zero things. That was just a statement. Our council, that's just like our council saying we are gonna curb growth, but there's actually no effect to that resolution. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that one permit is going to be denied or have the ability to be denied. And so I've seen that on social media or heard about that, and it's just not really, in my opinion, an effective way to manage a city. I think the more effective way is to have really good planning, to be able to have a guide in the direction that we're going and the way in which we're growing. And it's to make those key investments. The challenge we have with the pace of growth that we've had, though, is you can't keep up with it. You can't keep up with 14% growth year over year. So I hope that doesn't happen moving forward. But we're making those key investments. We're spending over $300 million on CIP expense, and we're hiring a record number of staff in the history of our city. If you could look at the last 3 years, we've hired over 200. We're going to hire over 200 staff people in 3 years in this organization. That's incredible. I mean, and that's a huge sign of support by our council and our community. And I think it's important to do. I'm not saying that we don't have pressure points in our organization. I absolutely feel it. I think a big part of how we manage through that is making sure we're really judicious in the initiatives we're taking on in our workload and making sure that we're managing that. We've mentioned employee recruitment and retention. What is the city doing to help with this ideology? Well, I would say one is we've hired some people and we hired additional people in HR in order to be able to be quicker in terms of recruitment related to quicker in terms of job classifications, posting things online, getting the word out, using our different resources to advertise positions. I hope you feel that we are working on being a good employer through the benefits and compensation that we're looking at, and we've been implementing, and council's been supporting, to looking at making sure that we're a learning organization. So, and focusing on and valuing culture. A big part of our initiatives with Gallup is to really help get a sense of engagement and having an ongoing effort and work plan to manage and to grow and encourage better engagement. And we've seen that. We've seen actually year over year enhancements in engagement within our organization. So I think those are all part of having good retention and recruitment. Can a position that is not getting pay incentives for more certifications start receiving them? Work within your department. We've added those types of pay increases within our organization in several different positions. So I would just say, work back through your organization. Email me directly. I'm happy to look at that with our team and with you. Have you ever considered a gas stipend for employees that are not allowed or able to work from home? No, we haven't. I do think that we did increase pay when we were seeing high inflationary, really high inflationary impacts. And we did that mid-year increase, and it was kind of across the board, 3% increase for employees mid-year on top of everything else that we're doing. And so we're sensitive to those kind of inflationary impacts. We've not looked at gas stipends. Are there plans in place to remodel the market pay structure to avoid long-standing employees placed in? Yeah, well, actually, let me finish the question. I'm sorry. Are there plans in place to remodel the market pay structure to avoid long-standing employees placed in the same salary as new employees because of large market study pay changes with the starting pay? The answer is we actually will continue to look at those kinds of things. So we changed our market approach the last couple of years, where we give higher increases for longer term employees. So you get a higher percentage increase if you're a longer tenured employee and you're seeing market changes, but we'll continue to look at that. Will there be adjustments to the water fund later in the year? Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. If we need to, we will. We've adjusted the fund. We've adjusted different funds. We adjusted mid-year the electric fund this year, and I believe, and the water fund. So we have mid-year adjustments, and we do that based on just the different pressure points that we're seeing. Will Lake Georgetown be able to support the additional draw for the South Lake? Yes, it will. That's all part of the modeling that we've worked on. So yes, it will. Oh, okay, sorry. Any questions for you all? Any other questions for folks that are in the room here? And then we're running out of questions here, which is okay. What kind of service fee increases will there be? We've looked at some. So in parks and recreation and library, we're looking at the cost of service and looking at making some increases to service fees there. And I mentioned this service fee increases or rate increases in the water fund from 13%. And then we also have a rate increase for solid waste, 4.5% for residents, and then 9% for commercial. And that's based on cost recovery, because the commercial is we're not recovering enough revenue on the commercial side. So it's kind of being offset by residential revenues. Oh, that's a good question. I've got a good one coming up. I need to take a quick swig of my coffee. All right. So the question is, how is the city having to have budget cuts? We're the fastest growing city in the nation for 2 years in a row. So I mentioned the absorption, kind of slower growth that we've seen and we're projecting for this next year. Secondly, I mentioned this, that having to absorb the increases that we've seen over the last year. So those are two big drivers in our budget for this next year. And then, and so that's what drove us to budget cuts. Now, let me give that in context. I think for the general fund, we saw $500,000 of budget cuts for a $100 million budget. And so, and I'm not trying to minimize those cuts, but they are, I mean, they're not as, on the scale of what we're seeing, they're not as significant. Now, if we have pressure points throughout the year, where we see we need to make some adjustments and we have the ability to do that, we'll do that. But that's the reason for the cuts, is to make sure we are able to fill some of the other pressure points and also some of the drivers of costs in the budget for this year. Will the city be creating any new funds in the future year? Were any new funds created this year? So I'm going to assume that means our fund structure. So the structure of our budget, we have like the general fund, the water fund, the electric fund. We are moving solid waste out of the general fund and creating its own fund. So it is pretty traditional to be seen that way. And it's to make sure that the charges that we're making, charges that we're applying for customers, that there's the appropriate recouping of cost that we're seeing for solid waste services. The largest cost is obviously our contract with TDS, but we also have costs with the debt associated with the large transfer station redo that we're doing. So I'm going to assume that was the fund increase that you were referring to. Will there be any changes to retiree insurance rates? They seem to be very, very high. No, we have, so the retiree insurance rates, as I recall, they're pass-through. So the retiree insurance rates are what the city pays. We do not subsidize retiree insurance rates. So there are not plans right now to reduce those, but there are not plans to increase those either. Okay, as a city, there's some questions about benefits. So have we considered providing professional development perks such as Coursera courses or LinkedIn Learning? Additionally, would it be possible to have reduced childcare costs at the rec center for members that would like to work out but have children? So we have a lot of actually training and development opportunities. So my encouragement would be to make sure that you're actually taking advantage of the things that we have. I also, in my opinion, I believe we have strong professional development budgets within departments for specific training and development. So if there's something that you feel like is important as a part of our of your development in your role, then let us know and we can work on that, work with your department. In terms of discounts at the rec center, no, we have not looked at that, but we do. But it is a significant benefit that we do get, which is employees. We get free memberships at the rec center, which is a huge benefit, and I would challenge on whether that's common across city organizations. So I think that's a really good perk that we do have today. Has the city looked into the expansion? And by the way, these are great questions. Has the city looked into expansion and selling of reclaimed water or rate adjustments to reuse water? Yes, we have a big reuse study master plan that's happening right now. Because if you look at our integrated resource plan for water, and that's looking at water over the next 50 years, part of that includes treating water to where it can actually be put into our drinking supply to a level that can be. Right now, we treat the water, and a lot of the reclaim goes towards irrigation, our park system, irrigation at Southwestern and golf courses. And so long term, we're looking at how we can utilize that to put back into our drinking supply as a way in which we manage the growth of our overall water system. Okay, so is this the last question? Maybe. Okay. All right, this will be the last question because it feels like this is towards the end. What character is Big Dave? I did not say that about myself. Big Dave going, assume it's about me, going to play in the next Cape production. So the next Jim. Well, we have been thinking about the holiday. We don't think a lot about it, but we have been thinking about the holiday gym, the Georgetown Central Messages, and we will have something. But no, I'm not going to share what we're cooking up. But I think it could be a fun one this year. That's all I'm going to say. But I appreciate our Cape team and thank you for the question. And why do we do that? We do that, one, because we want you to watch the videos. We want you to watch Georgetown Central Messages because we want you to stay informed about things happening within our organization and in the community. It's a big communication tool we use for internal communications. And then we also want this to be a fun place to work. I mean, I know it's work. We don't always get to have fun every day, all the time, but we want this to be an enjoyable place to work. And so that's just a little part of having injecting humor into our daily work. And I think that's important. For those of you, do we have any other questions? Oh, okay, great. Oh, I've got a lifeline to help me and correct something. So we do have the services of Urban Sitter. So it's not a,
That's what.
this is going to be Marilee.
Yeah. All right. Good morning. Urban Sitter is available for employees who are seeking childcare, housekeeping, organization skills. It's available for every employee. If you check on the Workday website, you'll see there's a link on the homepage, and it's also for pet services. So it's available. $200 has been invested into each employee to use. So look at there if you're looking for the question related to working out and childcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the plug on Urban Sitter. That's great. All right. Any other questions that we have in the queue? Any other questions in the room? All right. So let me just conclude our time today, but just by saying thank you for being and tuning in as a part of this. Thank you for the good questions, some of the hard questions, and for also pushing us a little bit to look at different things. It is really important for us to be a good employer and a good place to work. And that means making sure that we're supporting you not only with to help you be successful in the role that you have, compensate you fairly for that, know that you're appreciated for that work, but then also understand the various pressure points you have in your broader life and how we, again, can be a good employer for you to support you in all different ways, all sorts of ways. So my hope is you feel that, and I would really encourage you to just make a plug for, we're going to be doing some survey work through Gallup coming up in the fall, and it's a part of our regular engagement survey. It's important for you to fill that out. It's important for us to focus on that because we really want to know how you're doing, making sure that this is a great place for you to contribute. And it's not just contributing to get a paycheck, although it's good. We get paid tomorrow, I think, right? Yes? Okay, yeah, we get paid tomorrow. All right, seeing nods. Awesome. It's a good place to get a paycheck, but I just would challenge you and encourage you to make sure that you see the broader impact of what you get to do every day. So whether it be saving lives, sustaining lives, enhancing lives, enriching lives, or supporting those that are doing that, you're making a difference in this community. And we're not randomly the fast growing city. We are very much a community that is desirable to be in. And you get to be a big part of that, and you are a big part of that. So thank you very much for what you do. And you know, the budget is always, it's a great time to be able to get a good sense of where we are and where we're heading. But it's also just the recognition that we've got various limitations, and we're focusing on pushing resources to where we see the most pressure points and where the community is pointing us in terms of the highest priority. So thank you all for your continued support, for being part of this. Thank you for your breakfast taco eating. And don't forget to grab one on the way out. I'm sure we have some left over. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.